said, no, that's just a bad idea. Um, but I did tell our director that more than like 35 years ago, there was a woman I was going out with that I didn't want to sleep with, not because I didn't like her, but just because I thought it would complicate things, because there was somebody else that I was also semi going out with that I really wanted to go out with. So anyway, I took a wood burning set and burnt a fake herpes sore onto my wiener, in case she asked to see it to prove. So I did the same. It was stupid then and it's stupid now, but anyway. I went,
Showed her your wiener?
no, but I had the sore in case she demanded to see the herpes wiener.
You know, once you burn your wiener,
Yeah.
the pleasure receptors are damaged permanently.
I've done
Sometimes.
so much damage to that thing anyway. How do you know that? It was superficial.
Never you mind how I know that. That's none of your goddamn business.
Speaking of,
By the way,
wrote down GD, goddamn also stands for Groundhog Day. And there was a Super Bowl, and one of the most excellent commercials was revisiting Groundhog Day starring Bill Murray. The deal is that when you have a Jeep Wrangler, you don't mind reliving the same day over and over again, hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. It was a great commercial. So I endorsed that commercial. I endorsed the original Groundhog Day, and I endorse a movie that didn't get seen enough, a Tom Cruise movie that was like Groundhog Day with aliens called Edge of Tomorrow. They just showed it on Sci-Fi, and I assume they show it in probably fairly regular rotation. I don't know. Anyway, it's fun. It's got Tom Cruise. It's got Emily Blunt as a very badass super soldier.
He likes her because she's a little bit, she's like the same size as him.
They do cast people who are all kind of in that 5'6" range.
Little people.
Yeah. Well, but you know that's Hollywood.
I didn't know what you said.
Well, anyway, it's Groundhog Day with aliens where they get killed over and over again, and they return to the same day, and having learned a little bit more every day.
Wow.
And it's good. They spent a lot of money on it. Tom Cruise starts off as a real dirtbag who, that's it. He's got a character arc. Emily Blunt is always great. Anyway, on to the next thing. Tonight's guest is Trish, right?
Yeah, that's Trish.
Which makes me think about, I bet you there aren't many babies being named Trish now.
Trisha.
Trisha. All right, still, maybe, will that be short for Trisha? I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's right. Good. Yeah.
my wife, I'm Rick, obviously, and my wife is Carol, and those names are very time-bound. You know, of all the Ricks and Carols, if you graph the ages of every couple named Rick and Carol in the world, it would peak. Most couples are in their 50s with those names. Nobody gets named Rick or Carol anymore, which is a little bit, it's one more way that, I feel old.
Well, aren't you named Richard?
Yeah, but nobody's named Richard anymore.
What? Well, wait a minute. So, is it because you don't want to be called Dick?
No, but I mean, like, it's not probably not one of the top 30 names. When I was born, it was probably in the top 12.
No, but my point is you could have picked Rich, Dick,
Yeah.
or Rick.
Well, nobody wants to be Dick.
So you picked Rick.
I started off as Ricky. I didn't pick that. That just seemed to be the name that I was given. And I wanted to seem more mature because I thought it would help me get a girlfriend. So first I went to Richard, and then it didn't help me get a girlfriend. And also my mom would say, Richard! And that was bad.
they call you Ricky?
Ricky, I should have stuck with Ricky. Ricky is a very approachable name. Anyway, no, I mean, just any form of, there just aren't that many Richards being named now.
Well, if you want my opinion, virtually 2/3 of men I know are named Rick or Mike.
Yeah. How old are the guys you know?
Yeah, okay.
Above a certain.
Yeah, yeah, in your fifties.
All right, should we get to the serious stuff?
By the way, do you want to announce that our guests can ask questions that they want
Oh,
to?
yeah, what do? They type on our page or something?
Yeah, they just type it.
By the way, somebody keeps asking about Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
Like, every time I read the comments, there's somebody that wants to talk about Andrew Yang. And every time I try to rouse myself to research him enough to have anything of value to say, I realize that there's something more topical and timely. And so I don't do it. I assume you would have slightly more interest, even
I
though.
like that he wears a little button that says math. Make America think hard, I think, or harder, or something.
But, who did you endorse last week? I was researching.
Oh, I like Biden because I think will get some crossover votes. And I like Warren, because I think, you think she's a socialist who's gonna give all of America's wealth to something or whatever, but like, she started off as a Republican, she did a lot of work for banking as a lawyer and decided, she saw what's bullshit and what isn't, and I think that she would be a reasonable president. I don't think she would burn the country down to socialist ashes. She just seems like she's smart and energetic and competent.
Is she honest to you?
I don't think that she's dishonest.
Okay.
And also her scandal, the thing that, like, the equivalent of her emails is that she claimed to have more Native American blood than it turned out that she had. So you need some scandal to be like the sponge that it soaks up all the negative attention, and that's a good sponge to have.
All right, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So growth for 2019 was 2.3%. You promised me growth of 3 to 4% under Trump.
I promised.
And also, like, I think bankruptcies among small farms are up 8-fold or something. So the economy's pretty good. Unemployment is super low. Stock market has been going along. It's been. I mean, it hasn't been it's been okay.
Well, it's record highs.
It's hit some highs.
It's the highest it's ever been.
Yeah,
It's always going up, but I mean, it's continuing to always go up.
but right now with the coronavirus, it's freaking people out.
Okay. All right, Jeremy, I just, in the defense of the growth rate, the only thing I have to say about it, so we don't have to argue back and forth, is that Trump has fought a grueling battle with China to try to get fairness, and which he won recently. The first American president to ever try to fight China.
You're taking that light with you.
It says, somebody just commented, it's tough to hear. I think maybe because I'm so far away.
Oh, okay.
So,
Oh, shit.
Hey.
growth is that Trump's is the first and only president to have waged a struggle with China to get a fair deal, which he just succeeded in getting this month, in the past 30 days. And this deal was badly needed by our country. My hat's off to him. Because of this struggle with China, because our economies are intertwined, it did affect the growth rate. But Trump made a deal with them this month, in the past 30 days, and with Canada. Those two deals should greatly help our growth rate for next year, because they'll go into effect and
This year.
right, this year. So I'm not that worried about it. It's not time to be really upset.
Well,
The
you should
year
be upset
in 2018, he got 2.9%. So it was 0.1% off of the 3% that we wanted. but 2.9 is very good. It's better than the last few quarters of Obama.
Well, Obama had 8 years, and some of them were good. The
The
deal is,
last ones were below 2%.
if you say so.
We can look it up.
No, we don't have to. A couple things. One is, after World War II, America had some kick-ass growth rates, but we owned the world. We were the nation that wasn't in ashes. So, people are encouraged to, by looking at the past, you might think that, the growth rates of year after year of more than 4% are attainable, but they're tougher to get now because we're not the sole economic leaders of the world.
By the way, can you hear us better? There was a comment by President Tu, I believe. Let us know if you can hear us, the folks on the live
And
chat.
now, I should probably research, there's probably, like, I've heard, or I've read on Twitter, which is like being told nothing, because it's not super reliable. The Canada-Mexico deal is pretty much like, the previous deals, but I don't know, because I haven't researched it. And I haven't researched the China deal either, but, just based on me knowing nothing about it, I tend to want to
Great.
give you, I don't want to give Trump.
Thank you, President Z. No, it's just,
I don't want to give Trump credit for anything, but I grudgingly will give him credit for it seems like challenging China seems like a good thing to do. All right, so what's the next thing? You wanted,
You had
Hunter Biden?
oh, no, I want to hit that later.
My thing?
No, let's do one more thing, which
Oh.
is, and I'm going to do a disclaimer on top of it. Like, people who don't like Trump like to tweet clips of Trump stumbling over his words, or losing track of a sentence in the middle of it, or the ever popular having trouble going down the steps exiting Air Force One. And then they like to tweet, opinions
Thank you,
from professionals, like people who deal with people with Alzheimer's, people in the field, saying, well, wow, he looks like he's got early onset dementia, or da-da-da, and he says a bunch of, today he doesn't seem like, I don't know, he makes a lot of mistakes, and he says a lot of shit that isn't true. Today, after the Super Bowl, Twitter erupted in delight because Trump congratulated the Kansas City Chiefs, and indeed the entire state of Kansas, for their victory, except that the Kansas City that the Chiefs are located in is in Missouri, not Kansas. So anyway, this leads to a lot of people on Twitter saying that his brain is turning to shit. And I would tend to buy it, but not entirely, because you can't diagnose somebody from afar. And when it comes to like going down the steps of Air Force One, every president has had trouble exiting an aircraft. Gerald Ford, who was a great college athlete, one of the greatest, one of the most athletic presidents of recent times, stumbled a lot getting out of the plane, to the point where the Saturday Night Live, in its early years, made fun of how he stumbles over everything, and it probably cost him the presidency, getting reelected, being made fun of as a stumblebug. So saying that Trump's brain is turning to shit because he has trouble with the stairs, he's a 73-year-old overweight guy, and that's a guy who's going to be, unless he's an idiot, is going to be cautious coming down those stairs. So yeah, I think Trump's brain is probably not what it was 30 years ago. I guess people who've compared his raconteur skills when he was Howard Stern all the time to now say there's been a decline, but I don't know. And the White House will never release any official information on them or even test, in any reasonable way. So the question is Trump in mental decline? And I say possibly, but hard to tell.
All right. Do you have
Lance,
anything
people are
else?
saying they can't hear you, you need to speak up.
They're saying they can't hear me? Okay. Are you finished? with
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
had to say?
yeah.
All right. Well, here's the situation. I'm gonna do a report. I'm gonna spend, as long as it takes, I think it should be less than 20 minutes. It might be over.
Can I set it up a little bit? By saying, just for years now, every few episodes, we will get in an argument about uranium-1, culminating with our most time spent and probably most yelling during the previous 2 episodes. And so, here you go.
Real quick, we have a question. It seems a majority of American presidents are all white men. Will that ever end? That was the question. Do you want to tackle that, Lance?
I don't care what race the president is. I'm Jewish, and I don't care if there's ever a Jewish president. But demographically, the country is changing.
Old white men, they said. Okay, I'm sorry. It seems a majority of American presidents are old white men. Will this change?
Yeah.
Well, I hope that our presidents are always old, because old people are wiser than young people. But the country is changing. I mean, we just had Obama, and he's probably the first of many mixed race and other than white race people. I don't know why there wouldn't be. So that I'm not worried about it. Rick?
Well, yeah, the country, everybody's been predicting, and it's supposed to happen in the next couple decades, we will become a majority-minority country where most people aren't white. And at some point, probably most Americans will be Latino. I think, right? I don't know. But anyway, whitey's shrinking demographically as a percentage of the overall population. But there's another, so yeah, you'll have President, if you look at science fiction, there's always a President Mendoza, or, that's an easy way to seem like it's in the future, is to give a president who's some kind of non-old white person. But I just figured something out. The fight against mixed race couples in media just ended. It just collapsed. Like, it used to be illegal in a lot of states to marry somebody who's not of your race, particularly white-black. And that ended just a few decades ago. But you'd think there would still be people upset about that stuff. If people are still upset about, the Confederate flag and abortion and all these issues, gay rights, gay marriage, how did this fight end? And now wherever you go, whatever you turn on, there are mixed race couples. And it's like, how did people just become accepting of that? And I realized it's not acceptance. It's cool that it's all over the place. I like that. But what it is if you show a mixed race couple, you get to hit multiple demographics all in one couple. And it's like, white guy with black woman means, hey, white people and black people, this is your product. So I think hitting demographic bases overcame any fear that a mixed race couple would offend some viewer.
Say hi to Adam. Adam Laura's live.
Hey, Adam. Hey, Adam is our best friend.
All right.
Do you want to say hi to Adam?
Does Adam have a question before I go on about uranium-1?
I have just a real quick question. I don't know if any of the folks live saw the Super Bowl halftime show, but it was pretty amazing. Shakira and J-Lo, and they were dressed pretty skimpy, and there was a bunch of chicks in skimpy outfits, and they were pole dancing, and I mean, if you want to go by the the left standards, it seems like it was kind of a little misogynistic. How do you feel about that, Lance? Do you think that do you think it's a little bit hypocritical? Some of these, they talk about the misogynistic rapport of men, and then yet they kind of
It's a tough position because we are driven by biology, and guys still have to jizz, and women still have to girl jizz, and there'll always be stuff that's semi-bonerific. Mr. or Ms. Director, sent us an article about how our nudes, it was asking the question, are nudes in art just softcore pornography for rich people? And I would say to a certain extent, yeah, maybe. I've been in galleries where I don't think Lance's nudes are for jacking off to. But I've been in galleries in like Laguna and shit, where there are a gazillion galleries, where they sell like these sexy lady lucite, and they're pretty cool looking, but they're also super cheesy. But there's a whole market for like pretty ladies kind of just casually reading naked on a couch, right, Lance?
Yeah, yeah.
And that to me seems less like pure art than your art, and it seems like it's a little bit of the bonerific market. Like, you think you're buying art, but you're also buying something like, I will shop for bikinis and lingerie every once in a while, so that online, I won't buy anything, but I'll go look at them. So I'll get pop-up ads with pretty ladies in bikinis and lingerie, which reminds me that when I reach a stopping point to look at serious pictures of naked ladies, it's just like a little push and I kind of have a feeling that like some of these like naked lady lucites kind of do that same thing.
When you say lucite, you mean clear
Acrylic.
Acrylic sculptures that are clear plastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my argument is that if there's a man out there that can get sexually aroused by looking at a statue, then my hat's off to him. I admire that guy. So, I don't think there's anything sexual about statues. And I think that it's part of the left's goal is to turn men and women against each other. Listen, I can't yell through this whole thing. It's very late at night and I'm tired. So if you want to get it closer to me, or if you want to switch to the other camera, that's fine. Is this the only way we can live stream?
we'll fix it next time.
Yeah. This is our first, it's an experiment. We're,
If I get a headphone, I can get a microphone for this, but we're just
All
experimenting.
right, well, here's the thing. I have to give a half-hour report on uranium one. So when we start, I want the volume to be okay.
Okay,
So
yeah,
what do we
I'll
do?
go to this side, yeah, and get closer to you.
All right, let's do that now.
By the way, Adam had a question on uranium. Go ahead, Adam. Adam Lohr wanted to ask you a question on uranium one. So I think he's gonna type it out right now. Do you wanna add anything to the,
well, we can start, and then as the question arrives, we can,
but I don't wanna interrupt Lance when he's doing his,
well, let's,
all right.
All right, does Adam have his question ready?
I don't think it's.
all right, so
I'll
just
tell you-
go,
I'll tell
you
you
might
what,
end up
Adam.
answering the
Yeah,
question.
Adam, I'm gonna answer every question you've ever thought of, so get the camera ready,
Okay.
get to the side that is best, so I don't have to scream.
Lance might say a bunch of stuff that I disagree with, but we're kind of agreeing that Lance provided me with paper and pen, so I'm gonna write down my objections and at the end, I'll come back with.
Adam says he has a different question later, so to go ahead.
Right.
Let me just fix this here.
You need a new charger director. That thing's about to,
I know. All right, let me just come this way.
thank you for your patience, everybody.
Oh!
Okay, we're back. 141.2 or something.
All right, here we go. So, the reason I'm doing this is that our disagreement about the uranium one deal has been crazy. We've gone over it many times, and in every conversation, there have been confusions, all right? So I feel like we have a responsibility to state the facts as well as we can. But believe it or not, even though this is just a rinky-dink operation, I don't want anything going out from our show that's not true. We do have to have some credibility. So I did about 40 hours of research. I read the actual State Department documents, and my sources for this are, number one, the New York Times, Breitbart, and Peter Schweitzer. But believe it or not, the New York Times was verified pretty much everything I'm going to say in an article in 2015. I also have supporting documents from the State Department and the CFIUS organization. Now, CFIUS is the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. So we'll start with the main premise. The problem that, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. I'm just making sure this camera A is go on.
All right?
Yeah.
So the problem that Rick has with me is that he does not believe that Hillary Clinton made an illegal or unethical deal to sell our uranium to the Russians, or was part of it, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, don't quibble over the phrasing. I'll get it real clear as we go on, okay? So let's just put it this way. I'll keep it vague. Let's say you don't believe that Clinton was mixed up in a deal to sell uranium to the Russians, right?
Basically.
Okay. Now, the reason that there's been so much confusion over the past three of our shows is that there were actually 3 deals. So, the first was in 2006, and this was a deal that began with a fellow named Giustra. All right? Now, Giustra is Canadian, and he started a company called Uranium One. The first deal he made was to go to the Ukraine, or I'm sorry, Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has a huge amount of uranium. So let's preface this by saying, first of all, what I'm going to say is outlined in the New York Times article, all right, and in Breitbart. So both the left and the right agree on everything I'm going to tell you. The Giustra went to Kazakhstan with Bill Clinton, and within a day or two of meeting with the president of Kazakhstan, Giustra was able to get control of the main uranium mines in Kazakhstan. Now, it's important for people to understand that uranium is mainly available in Russia, Kazakhstan, Australia, Canada. The U.S. has less. And it is the goal of Putin. We believe that all of the uranium deals I'm going to describe to you right now are because part of our argument, Rick and I, was that I was concerned that this uranium could be used to create nuclear weapons to kill us. And it isn't just the military purposes. Russia doesn't have a lot of great industry, but they have a lot of good natural resources. And the belief among experts of why all this began to occur is because Putin wants to corner the market of uranium. It's not just military. There is one, military. Two, there's a need for uranium for domestic purposes in Russia. Russia doesn't have as much as they would like to have. There's not an unending supply. And there are a lot of uses for uranium. But also, because Russia doesn't have a lot of great industries, they've got natural gas, they've got uranium, they have natural timber, natural resources. One of Putin's goals is to corner the uranium market. So by this Canadian Juster getting hold of the Kazakhstan uranium mines, he was able to ultimately, these uranium mines were sold to Rosatom. Rosatom is the Russian uranium company. So Rosatom then had their own uranium, had Russian uranium and Kazakh uranium. They've also attempted to get Australian, that's another big uranium, Canadian, and finally American uranium. So what they want to do is they want to control uranium around the world, or have a controlling interest, which would give them tremendous leverage business-wise, et cetera, et cetera. It shouldn't be hard to figure that out. Now, so the real problem began when Uranium-1, which was a small, basically nothing little company, went with Clinton to Kazakhstan and got control of these massive Kazakhstan mines. And nobody knows, it's very interesting, why Clinton, Justra, and the president of Kazakhstan met, or whether it influenced the deal, which came down within days of that meeting. All right, so we can't prove, and furthermore, there was no recording of the meeting that they had. It just so happened that a day or two later, Justra got control of the mines. Now, ostensibly, Clinton, when asked about it, Bill Clinton said he had the meeting with the president of Kazakhstan because they were concerned about AIDS in Kazakhstan, the disease AIDS, and health issues. They were concerned about health issues in Kazakhstan. So you can believe that if you want to. Now, the second deal is the plutonium deal that Rick and I keep arguing about. Okay, Rick and I both agreed. There were times when I said the word uranium, but I agree with Rick, and I agreed in our last show, and I agree now, that the second deal was a State Department deal for plutonium. That's why, now let me explain how this worked. Just to recap what our problem was in the last show. The only time I found Clinton's signature was on a State Department document. Hillary Clinton was on a State Department document where plutonium was discussed, an agreement about plutonium. Now, this agreement had been negotiated for years before that. And the idea was this, that both Russia and the U.S. were trying to cut back on excess nuclear bombs. And they agreed that it would be a good idea to destroy the excess plutonium. So this deal did not involve selling our plutonium to Russia. What the agreement involved was that, now we're in 2010, by the way, and Hillary is Secretary of State. What it involved was each country would take excess plutonium that they had that they weren't going to use for nuclear bombs, and rather than let that plutonium lie around or possibly get sold to Iran or North Korea or terrorists, that we would just simply destroy it or change its composition so it wasn't dangerous anymore. And that was the plutonium agreement. It was officially, it was called the plutonium dispersion or there's a name for it, meaning decommissioning of plutonium.
You take bomb plutonium and you make it into plutonium that can't be used in bombs.
Correct. Now, part of the most vicious arguments that Rick and I had were whether to call it, I kept saying plutonium when I meant uranium, or uranium when I meant plutonium. And being a physicist, Rick was very angry with me and called me dumb because I kept saying uranium when I meant plutonium, but vice versa. However, part of the reason for the confusion is that according to government documents that I have right here, the deal was referred to in a government document. President Obama signed Executive Order 13617, blocking property of the government of the Russian Federation relating to the disposition of highly enriched uranium extracted from nuclear weapons. Don't interrupt me. So, in many of the documents that I read, when they were talking about this plutonium deal, they referred to it as the HEU deal, highly enriched uranium deal. And the reason that they called it that is because plutonium is highly enriched uranium. Plutonium is made from uranium. So very often, and I've read about 5 documents referring to this deal, even though in the final State Department document it does refer to it as plutonium, there are other documents like this one right now, Executive Order 13617, June 25th, 2012, does refer to it as highly enriched uranium. So that's part of the confusion. Do you need to see this document?
No. I mean, that's what happens when you let non-physicists.
Can we see, can the camera see it?
Okay, here it is. It's kind of small.
Yeah, it's not
I'll
gonna
try to.
show up.
Well, there you go. Okay. But a guy could get the exact wording should never have been a big deal, because frankly, this deal, although it keeps coming up every time you type in uranium deal, Russia, America, 2010, this deal does come up. It comes up very often. And it kind of ruined our discussions a little bit between Rick and I, because it's not the deal that we're talking about. It's not the corrupt deal. Now, the funny thing about this deal, just to put a cap on it, is that this deal in 2016, Putin pulled out of the deal because we were having friction with Russia. So it's not even working anymore.
Great.
All right, now, I would just, go ahead.
Does Rick have anything, should he add anything at this
No,
point?
he's got to write things down, because I've got to develop this.
Oh, okay,
You want to write, you want to
I've
say
been writing this
something?
document, taking lots of notes.
All right, now, let me get back to, now that brings us back.
At this
to-
point, just real quick before, if any people on our live want to comment, feel free to do so, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
We might be here till 4 in the mornings, hashing this out.
All right, now,
They're hanging in there. We've maintained, you're doing a good job, Les. We maintain 8 people live.
okay, so now, I just want to say, one of the arguments about the Kazakhstan deal, that's the first deal from 2006, is that Giustra, Giustra, claims that he left Uranium One, his company, in 2007. But what he really did was continue in business with both. He formed a partnership with Bill Clinton called the Giustra Clinton Company or Partnership. And
In what year? Not while he was president.
in 2006, he continued. The 2006, Clinton wasn't in office.
Oh, yeah.
After
Okay,
he
yeah.
left Uranium One, he actually formed a business partnership with Clinton, with Bill Clinton, and I can give you the
That's
source
fine,
on
that's
that.
fine. Yeah.
He also continued a business partnership with Ian Telfair. Telfair continued to be the president of Uranium One. So technically, he may not have continued, but he was still in a business partnership with the head of Uranium One in another deal.
I hate to interrupt, but just, you can look at both cameras, because this is the taped one and this is the live one. So if you're just looking at this one, it's gonna look kind of weird.
All right, I just want people to be able to hear
Yeah,
me.
sure. You can go look at both.
All right, so now, Giustra drops out of the picture, but Telfair continues. He's now the president of Uranium One, and this brings us up to 2010. So at the same time that the regular deal for plutonium was being signed by the State Department, another deal, literally at the same exact time, was being made between Uranium One, Rosatom, the Russian uranium company, and mines that were owned by Uranium One in the United States. Okay? There are several uranium mines in the U.S., in Utah, Wyoming, various places in the middle of the country. These are owned by Uranium One. They constitute 20 and sometimes 50% of U.S. uranium production. These companies were bought when Uranium One was under Canadian ownership. The problem is that the Russians, Rosatom, gained control of a huge amount of stock in Uranium One. So they made a move to get control of Uranium One because one, they wanted the Kazakhstan mines. That was the initial draw. But then it turned out that the Canadian company had already bought American mines. Now, at the time, we had a deal with, we had an arrangement with a committee. The United States has a government organization called the Committee of Foreign Investment in the U.S.
Just call it CFIUS from now on.
I'm going to call it CFIUS from now on.
CFIUS, yeah.
Okay? Now, one of the problems that Rick had with me earlier, last week, was he refused to accept that CFIUS was headed by Hillary Clinton. So I have here a document from the U.S. Department of Treasury. Okay? I'm waiting for it to come up. While it's coming
Well, it's
up,
coming up.
I'll
The-
just-
The rattling, there are 20, 25 mile per hour winds going on, so it's rattling
okay,
stuff.
that, nobody cares. All right, here is a U.S. Department of Treasury document. The members of CFIUS include the heads of the following departments and offices. And right here, you can see Department of State. Okay? Do you see that? Do you accept this, Rick? This is the Department of Treasury official document. Department of State, heads of the following departments of offices. And what that means is that Hillary Clinton was on the board
Yeah, all right.
of CFIUS.
Well, no, I don't, but go on. Because you
All
don't want me
right,
to interrupt you now.
That's fine. Now, okay, fine, interrupt me later. So now, Rick is going to attempt to split hairs, so I'm gonna build this up. I'm gonna explain this.
Let's go quick,
No, I'm not gonna go quick.
Lee.
So here's the situation. According to the bylaws of CFIUS, some matters of lesser importance can be handled by subordinates to the Secretary of State. But a matter of this importance is typically dealt with by the Secretary of State herself. Now, let's get into a little background on Hillary Clinton when it comes to CFIUS. It turns out that Hillary Clinton took a special interest in CFIUS affairs while she was a senator. And she's famous. One of her most important battles was to prevent a Chinese company from buying these uranium mines. Okay? So one of her battles, something of particular interest that she is on record of doing, was fighting to prevent a.
Where's this from?
Okay, this is in the New York Times.
Okay, all right. Just-
Or-
you don't have to.
and also, this is in Peter Schweitzer's book. Now, if you don't believe me, then we can look up her record, but both the New York Times backs up Schweitzer's book, and I can find you the page
All right,
in
just tell me the
Schweitzer's
title
book.
of Schweitzer's book.
It's called Clinton Cash.
Do you have it?
I have it right here,
Oh.
but I want to continue.
Sure.
Now, in fact, one of the things you may even remember was that, because I remember this is Lance Richland's memory.
Okay.
There was a deal where during the Bush Jr. administration, where Hillary actually raised a fuss because CFIUS had given approval to give some of our harbors to the United Arab Emirates, and given control, sold things. And she was the one that raised the fuss. And she said CFIUS, while she was in the Senate, should not have given approval to this. So Hillary, you cannot possibly prove that Hillary does not have a lengthy and passionate record of preventing foreign investors from buying things in the U.S., that including uranium mines. Now, the reason I was never able to find Hillary Clinton's signature, because every week Rick would say, "Where is her signature? I don't believe it." And so I kept looking and looking and looking. The reason I couldn't find her signature on the CFIUS deal is because CFIUS meetings are in secret.
Oh.
Not only are they in secret, but they have a policy of not revealing how their negotiations went or why they reached the decision they reached. Now, we know that a man named we know that a man named, let's see, I'm going to look up the exact name of the person, okay? Let's see, Siphius and State, New Yorker. I want to find the first Breitbart. Hang on, I need to find the exact thing. This is from Breitbart. You know, if you want to turn off the camera, you can.
Yeah, do that.
No, wait, I've got it.
Reboot. We're gonna go, okay, episode 3. Right.
All right,
Oh,
141.
sorry. Really?
141.3.
All right, now the reason, to put a very fine point on it, one of Rick's excuses as to why you can't blame Hillary for this is that her name wasn't on the CFIUS approval. So it turns out that the person that was in charge at that time was one of her undersecretaries, an assistant. So she was the head of state, she was the Secretary of State, but her assistant was presiding over CFIUS at the time, and his name was Jose W. Fernandez.
Ooh, Jose.
Okay, so we don't have any signature from her, but we have the approval had to come from her Assistant Secretary of State, Jose Fernandez. Now, the important thing about that is that he could not approve this if he was at odds with his boss, Hillary Clinton. In other words, Hillary Clinton was his boss. If you want to tell me that he went against her wishes, there is no evidence for that, okay? Furthermore, but this is the most interesting part, Hillary Clinton was under an obligation to President Obama. She had signed a contract with him before taking office as Secretary of State that she would reveal all conflicts of interest. And according to the ethics guidelines of government, CFIUS in particular, she was under obligation to tell Jose Fernandez that she had just received millions and millions and millions of dollars from Giustra when he was head of Uranium One and Telfair. And it turns out that Telfair, between Telfair and Giustra and other executives at Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation received $145 million. This is all money coming in from people that had interest in the Uranium One deal. Now you may say, why is it that so many millions of dollars would have been, supposing there was a bribe, okay? Why? Now, you can't prove a bribe in this regard because no one has been brought before, no one's been questioned about it. No one's been put under oath, nobody has been brought to court, and so we are left to wonder why over $100 million was given to the Clinton Foundation at the same time that this agreement was being made. Furthermore, after the deal was sailed through, after CFIUS approved it, Bill Clinton was given $500,000 by bankers that had in Russia that had invested in Uranium One. This is verified by the New York Times, 2015 article. Now, When people have asked,
Says Rick and Lance are always the coolest people in the room. That's what makes
Well, thank you.
it so weird.
who the hell would say that?
It says Simayo Nodias, Simayo Nodias, no, Nodias, Nadais.
Well, thank you, Samaya.
Ideas.
I,
Dave.
the only room that I'm the coolest person in is a room where I'm alone. You were pretty cool in high school, I think, somehow.
All right, well, let's just continue. Thank you. I hate you less. All right, so now, so let me just wrap this up, okay? Because I've been going almost a half hour. So it basically, here's the deal, guys. We know, according to the New York Times, according to Peter Schweitzer, according to Breitbart, according to the Clinton Foundation, millions and millions of dollars wound up in the Clinton Foundation, and at least $500,000 wound up in the pocket of Bill Clinton. We also know that Bill and Justra continued in business after the Kazakhstan deal. They actually have a company together, and that Telfair, the head of Uranium One, contributed millions to the Clinton Foundation. And the result of all this is that, as I say, Russia was able to get control of massive uranium mines from Russia, Kazakhstan, the US, and Canada. And part of the reason, one article, for example, that I read this in, was an Australian newspaper. And I thought to myself, now why is an Australian newspaper writing about this in such an alarmed way? And the reason is that Australia is a big uranium source, and Rosatom, the Russian company under Putin, went after Australia next.
Which Australian newspaper?
Well, Rick, I don't remember the name of the Australian newspaper, but I can find it.
Okay, just because Rupert Murdoch owns at least one Australian newspaper.
Oh, and by the way, another one of the sources that is backing me up on this is Bloomberg.
Okay.
Okay.
Mini Mike.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, that's my story. Now I'll just wrap it up with my accusation. One, Bill and Hillary were willing to sell out our country by giving. Oh yeah, the uranium from those mines was not highly enriched. It could be highly enriched, and the uranium did leave the United States. In 2013, it was found that the uranium had left the United States. So, not all of it, but some of it had made its way to Europe and Japan, and from there, no one knows where it went.
Ooh.
So my point is, Hillary and Bill are basically traitors, and I think you've got to stop denying that this happened, and I'm going to give this over to you now, Rick.
Okay. There are some points of non-disagreement with Lance. One theme that comes up is when you're arguing against the mistreatment of Donald Trump, the impeachment and the scrutiny of what he said, just the scrutiny of Donald Trump's business deals and all that. I've heard it from you and I've heard it from our director that if we do this to Trump, then what's to stop this from being done from every high-ranking politician from now on? And I keep saying, well, I'm okay with it. One lesson from this, I don't buy, a lot of your arguments are circumstantial, but one thing that may come out of this is it seems like when people have a shitload of money and power, they tend to gravitate together. Like Jeffrey Epstein moved in powerful circles. He knew Trump, he knew Bill Clinton, he knew, what's his,
Dershowitz?
Dershowitz. He knew all these people. He had a lot of money, he had connections, he had access to hot high school girls. People in general, rich, powerful people in general, are going to have to watch their asses more and maybe not be so promiscuous in their business relationships, because we're going to be looking at this shit. Either one side or the other, or both sides are going to be one. You know, people are going to maybe have to be really scrutinized. You know, the Clintons, I would argue, you argue that they're traitors and that they're corrupt. I would argue, and we don't have to fight about this because it's just a philosophical thing, is that they were sloppy in their relationships. They would, you know, they took money from these people. They never thought about how any of this shit would look. They went into business. They spent $3 million on Chelsea's wedding. And there should be some kind of visuals officer in every powerful person's set entourage who says, yeah, you can do that, you've got the $3 million to spend, but how is that fucking gonna look when the opposition takes it apart? So if people are more careful about getting in bed with various people, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, that's thing one. Thing two is, I think we can agree that Russia, at least with regard to corporations and industry, is a lawless state. A kleptocracy is what it gets called a lot, right?
Sure.
All right, so Russia, and we can agree that Russia has just a tragically many, like half a millennium long history of fucking shit up. That, you know, that when it was the Tsar and the serfs, that was yucky for everybody in Russia, I guess. And then things got super shitty under so-called communist rule. You can call it communism, but it was more than that. It was Stalin slaughtering many tens of millions of his own people because he was paranoid and a motherfucker. And killing all your own experts. He just killed everybody, especially people who are in positions of any kind of power. Like, dictators do not help their countries because they kill experts, people who might know how to fix the country. And so you had, 30 years of Stalin, 25 years of Stalin. Before that, you had Lenin, who wasn't great. And then in the middle of that, you had World War II. And while all this was going on, there was this thing called Lysenkoism, which was an evolutionary theory that was accepted only in Russia because Lysenko was buddies with Stalin. And Lysenko had a non-Darwinian theory of evolution, which was applied to agriculture and ruined their fucking agriculture industry because they were using a theory that was completely wrong. And then Russia had a glimmer of hope when communism fell, and then that was perverted into a kleptocracy where dictatorial types like Putin took over, and he just kind of distributed industry to his friends. And Russia's just shitty at industry. Russia, the life expectancy.
Putin.
The life expectancy of Russian males is less than the life expectancy of males in Haiti. It's fucking terrible in Russia. And yeah, you said they have natural resources, and that's about all they have, because their industry sucks after years of communism and kleptocracy. And so they will cheat at everything, because they're not good at developing their own technology. So, that's a problem with treaties with any country, but especially shitty countries that are our enemies. They will cheat. And so, any kind of uranium deal they have, or plutonium deal, there's always the risk that they will cheat at it.
Somebody wrote Putin, P-O-O-T-I-N.
Yeah, Putin. I'm Putin, right? Well, yeah.
That somebody was,
All right. So I mean, that's
Cold
one of the
ramen.
contentions of the book on international oil that I just read by Rachel Maddow, which is that Russia is shit at exploiting its own oil. And so it got into this big partnership with Exxon when Tillerson was running Exxon, and then was very happy for Tillerson to become Secretary of State because Russia was hoping for a relaxation of sanctions against Russia, which was fucking up them being able to export oil.
Khalil Shine, damn, I can't.
Khalil?
K-A-H-L-I-L.
Khalil.
Schneider wrote, P-U, teen, P-U dash,
Poutine?
yeah,
Well, I
Poutine.
mean, that's Canadian French fries.
Oh,
All right, so we don't disagree that Russia doesn't play fair, right? Can we agree on that? That Russia will look for whatever advantages it can get.
how do you feel about Bernie Sanders spending his honeymoon in Russia?
I don't know. I mean, a bunch of senators on July 4th in 2017, a bunch of Republican senators went to Russia for nobody knows the reason why they went. Bill Clinton, when he was a Rhodes Scholar, spent some time in Russia. I mean, Russia, there's a politically incorrect term that Russia's a kind of a tar baby. Which is a baby made out of tar. If you touch it, you will get inextricably stuck. And Russia, among that's not playing fair, likes to entangle people. I mean, Bernie Sanders, I don't know, maybe he went to Russia to see communism in action. At that point,
He wrote about it, actually.
he
He said it was great.
or maybe he thought he liked the art of Russia, who knows? But he was probably interested in seeing communism in action, and at the time he wasn't powerful enough to come under any special attention from Russia. But still, Russia, if you're a foreign tourist, particularly from America, going to Russia, they will check you out.
Mm.
I remember when I was in 9th grade, I went on one of these fucking 8 countries in 15 days tours of Europe. It's all right. Fucking, I can talk. You talk for a long time. But and we stopped in Czechoslovakia for a day or two. And we had to sit through a 90-minute presentation, 2-hour presentation on how socialism was great, or communism, whatever they were calling it. And we stayed in a hotel room where the radio only had one station, and it only had an on and off switch, and it just played communist propaganda all the time. And Russia and its then satellite, it was, they're motherfuckers. Anyway, so, all right, just to refute your specific points. All right. So I've argued that uranium is a commodity, and that if Russia were successful at cornering the market for uranium, you would see a spike in uranium prices. And you can go to Google, and I recommend, if you're interested in this shit, just don't trust us entirely. Just Google uranium one. And you can also Google the history of uranium prices. And the market is not cornered. The market has gone like this and then had a couple spikes here and there during international crises, but it's been roughly steady for the last, 20 years. So nobody's cornering the market for uranium. And I think what is implied by uranium one, the fear that's trying to be generated, is that at some point Russia will have all the uranium, all the exploding shit, and we won't have any, and that they will be able to take over the world because they'll be the only country with nuclear weapons, which is not the case. Because a lot of the treaties we've been working on with Russia for the past 20, 25 years has been to reduce the number of nuclear weapons that we each have from 6,000 for each country to 1,700. So we're not going to run out of nuclear weapons. What else? Sorry. You should also Google Clinton Cash, the book Lance mentioned by Peter Schweitzer, which I'm not going to take time to do it here, but it's you can just look at pros and cons about the book Clinton Cash. Lance is going to show us the book. And liberals consider it a hatchet job.
Where'd you get it, Lance?
The library, I can see.
Oh,
If it got Lance to go to the library, did you have to get a library card? You already have one.
That's personal.
Okay, but I like this. But LA has excellent libraries, and sending Lance to the library is a good thing. All right, so the 20 to 50% of America's uranium, as I've said a million times before, is America only has mines that supply about 8% of the uranium that America uses. We need to get 92% of our uranium from other places, Kazakhstan, Australia, wherever else in the world they mine uranium.
say miming?
Mine.
Oh,
So when uranium one eventually as far as I know, uranium one doesn't own, maybe they can correct me if I'm wrong, but what uranium one was negotiating, at least in one of these deals, the 2013 deal we were yelling about last week, was the right to enrich uranium mined in America, which you're not allowed to take uranium mined in America out of America except to enrich it in Canada. Now, hold on, because I'm going to bring some of your points up. You're supposed to, you take this uranium and you spin it up and till the explodey shit floats to the top, you pull that off, then you spin it up again. It takes weeks, months probably, until you've got all the little explodey atoms in there and fewer of the non-explodey atoms. And a lot of this shit's supposed to happen in Canada. And then once it's enriched enough to use in reactors, it gets shipped back to America for us to use in reactors and for whatever else we use uranium for. Now, Lance says that once the uranium went to Canada, then it did go on to other countries. It's not supposed to. But Lance will argue, and I'm not going to fight him on this.
I just wanted to say, according to the New York Times, they owned the uranium.
Okay.
They weren't just enriching it, they owned it as well.
But they weren't allowed to, by treaty, they weren't allowed to take it out of the country except to enrich it.
But they
Apparently, according to what you say, they cheated.
Yes.
And I'm not going to fight you on that.
Okay.
I haven't researched it, but
Well, that's why we don't make deals with Rosatom, the Russian energy organization, unless, of course, you can contribute millions of dollars to the Clintons.
all right. So another couple things. Again, like the Clinton Cash and the uranium one thing makes a lot of circumstantial arguments, and,
Well, you can't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
all right, so, Giustra, and what's the other guy, Tylenol,
Telfair.
Telfair, these guys, according to the timelines I've seen, and I'm not gonna fucking stand by it so strongly, because you're gonna come back with the next point, 2 points. I'll make a point, and I'll make your point for you too, is Giustra and Telfair, or at least were not officially associated with Rosatom or Uranium One at the time they made the big contributions to the Clinton Foundation.
No, that's not true. They made it before and after.
Okay, but and the other point is that you would argue that, yeah, were they really not part of these organizations anymore at the time?
Well, Telfair was the president of Uranium One in 2013 when Rosatom bought Uranium One.
Okay.
And the deal that gave the mines to the mines in Wyoming and Utah to Uranium One was made 3 years earlier in 2010, when Rosatom was only a major controller of stock. So, Rick, are you done, by the way?
I am done. But the deal is that,
Are you running out of gas on this?
the Uranium One scandal, you gotta go online, you gotta read stuff on this from people who are better at arguing than I am, and have more facts to marshal than I do. I still think it's been largely debunked. I think that,
How was it debunked? Just a mood you have? A feeling?
no, I mean, if you want me to do 40 hours of research.
Yes, I do.
Okay, all right.
All right, I'm gonna respond now. I am pissed off because at a certain point, you have to just admit that you're wrong. You can't just say, well, I know that there's someone out there that could argue against you, Lance. You just have to say, look, for 3 years now, I've called you, Lance, every name in the book. I've said you were dumb. I've said you were lying. I've said this is horseshit. I've said it's debunked. Now I've given you government documents. I've given you an article in the New York Times and Breitbart.
Well, Breitbart,
There's even an article in the New Yorker. Those are two liberal, the gold standard for liberal journalism. And they all back up what I'm saying. Here's my New York
no,
Times
they don't.
article.
The New York Times does not say that Hillary Clinton sold our uranium to Russia for donations.
Stop.
It doesn't say that.
Okay.
Pause real quick.
Hold on.
Okay, Rick, nobody is saying that because nobody can prove it.
Okay.
That's what I'm angry about, Rick. You can't prove that Hillary Clinton, who was in a position to advise the president not to do this deal, who just received millions, was not bribed. There's no document, there is no witness testimony where a guy got up there, where Telfair or Giustra or Hillary in a court of law said, yes, I was bribed. We don't have that. We don't have any signature. We don't have a film of her taking the money and saying, therefore, I will sail this deal through. Even though I thought a Chinese company, it just so happens by coincidence that you gave my foundation hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm going to let this, I just coincidentally am going to let this deal go through. We don't have her saying, no, because you gave me the money, I'm going to give you the uranium. We don't have her saying that, Rick. That's why bribery is difficult to prove.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
have, you're interrupting. And you have to rely on circumstances. In 2010, when the deal went down, Telfair began to give millions to Clinton. That was the year he decided to be charitable. to the foundation. And it's just a coincidence that Bill received $500,000 within months of this deal going down from a company, from bankers that had investments in Uranium One. High-level executives intimately involved with that. Now, what I'm angry about is you can't just admit that a reasonable person would give up on this and just say, I have no evidence on my side that Clinton wasn't getting bribed.
Well, that's like,
I admit.
when did you stop beating your wife? It's one of those.
Well,
But I'll make you a deal. I have a deal for. I
Rick.
have a deal for you. I'll yield on Uranium One if you yield on Trump taking money laundering deals from Russians via Deutsche Bank. You give me that, I'll give you Uranium One.
Okay, Rick. This is, the people watching this now are gonna say that that's a very crude out for you. We're not 12 years old. That might have worked when you were 12. Like another kid would say, well, your dad did even worse. No, it doesn't work that way. For 3 years now, you've been telling me that the Clintons were pure on the Uranium One deal, which has been completely debunked. And I've just proven to you, or I've proven to all objective people watching
No, you
this.
just gave circumstantial evidence.
But there is no way to prove, there is no filming of Clinton saying, give me $500,000 and I'll sail through the CFIUS deal. There is no way to prove that. I can't give you that.
Okay.
Nobody can. There is no film of it. There is no court. There is no court testimony where Clinton admits it.
Okay,
So what I'm saying is you have to be able to put two and two together, and you're willfully not doing it. And that's what makes me think you're either not terribly objective,
well, that's probably
or you're mischievous in this situation.
Well, no, but.
And what I'm saying is this, you need to prove that you have credibility at this point.
So, all right, so, fine, so, let me go, let me borrow Clinton cash, and let me go spend a certain number of hours.
Believe it or not, the New York Times has the better article.
Okay, what's the name of the
wait,
article for
no,
me
no,
and for everybody?
you can't get it. I'm gonna email
What
this
do you
to
mean?
you. You can't get it unless you buy the New York Times.
No, it turns
It's
out,
behind a
I've
paywall.
got I
All right.
found out a way
I'm
behind the
gonna
paywall.
email you this article
Okay,
right
all right.
now.
Okay.
When he turns the camera off, or I can do it when you're.
Yeah, but just when we're done, we're done.
Okay,
All right.
I'll email you the article. So
I
the
just
best
have one
article-
more, okay.
The best article was actually the New York Times.
All right, I have one last question, then we can move on to other stuff.
All right.
You must have read something about American uranium going to Canada and then from there to who knows where, right?
Correct.
Do you know, did that article, do you have that, know what that article is?
Well.
And also, do you have any idea about how much of it went elsewhere?
The exact amount?
Well, just roughly. And then, I don't know, we'll go on to Hunter Biden.
I think, should Adam ask this question now? Adam, if you
Yeah,
want,
go ahead.
if he's still there, Adam, you feel free to ask your question anytime now. Adam Lohr, who's,
Yeah, well, here is I'm gonna go to the most recent article, and,
we should take a break after this.
Okay, yeah, we'll break out.
Okay, Adam says, do you think,
oh, here it is.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'll answer your question.
after this, Adam,
The commission, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, confirmed that Uranium One, this is New York Times.
Same article.
Same article, last paragraphs. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission has confirmed that yellow cake which is uranium, which is raw uranium, was shipped to Canada even though it does not have the export license to do so. Instead, the transport company doing the shipping was RSB Logistics Services. So they got a shell company to do it for them. And the commission spokesman, that is from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission said, to the best of our knowledge, most of the uranium sent to Canada for processing was returned to the U.S. A Uranium One spokesman, Donna Witchers, said 25% had gone to Western Europe and Japan. At the moment, with the uranium market in a downturn, nothing is being shipped from the Wyoming mines. No export assurance given. The no export assurance, the quote, no export assurance given at the time of the Rosatom deal is not the only one that turned out to be less than it seemed. Despite pledges to the contrary, Uranium One was delisted from the Toronto Stock Exchange and taken private, and taken private. So it's now a private company, and it is now, as of 2013, 100% owned by Russia.
Okay, all right,
All right.
all right. So we're gonna take a break. Wait,
Adam?
Adam's question.
Says Adam's question reads, do you think traditional family roles of being a provider are comparable to socialism in a way? I'll repeat it. You want me to repeat the question?
No, like, so
Do you think traditional family roles of being a provider are comparable to socialism in a way?
all right, so last night, Saturday Night Live, had a skit where J.J. Watt was the guest. He's a huge football player, and they had a skit where the kid catches J.J. Watt, the dad, banging the mom, and then the morning after, the dad comes in to talk about it with the kid, and the kid doesn't want to hear about it. And dad goes into way too much detail, and then the mom comes in and pretty much explains that she gets everything she wants for the family, including, pays for the kids' clothes and everything, because what she gives up is so good. And so, in a way, I guess that's what Adam is asking about, is the idea of a male provider or a head of household, regardless of gender, providing for the rest of the family, a form of socialism. And I would argue that everything is a matter of culture. I mean, not within reason. That the trading, family roles for support from a breadwinner isn't considered socialism because it's part of our culture, and we don't consider our culture socialist. But what isn't considered socialist is a matter of tradition and fashion, and we get, until recently, until the Tea Party, say, people were not upset about, most people weren't going around saying taxation is theft. And most people weren't upset about money going to police and fire and roads and libraries, because even though paying for that stuff it could be considered socialism, but most people didn't consider, they just considered it part of the fabric of normal life until, Tea Party thinking became more popular and encouraged tens of millions of people to take a second look at stuff like that. But yeah, it's a matter, what isn't socialism.
Michael L. Wrote, the family unit is a socialist unit times per day.
5 times per day. Over the past year, I've worked out 5.5 times per day. Over the past 29 years and 12 days, I've worked out an average of 4.65 0.418 times per day, or 32.49 times per week on average.
Adam, I don't know where you get that idea. Socialism means the government takes care of you and your kids. The family taking care of your kids and each other is the basis of American capitalist democracy. That is our system. That's the American way of life. So in other words, if you and your family are the unit that takes care of you and your family and not the government, that's the opposite of socialism. According to Marx, the children are the property of the government, the people, not the family. So that's why, among other things, the socialists try to wreck family cohesion in the U.S. because they want the government to take care of people and become good little slaves and voters for the Democrat Party.
Here's an interesting thing. In the 19th century, when the West was being settled, the West was divided into, I believe, 6 mile by 6 mile, I don't know, were they called townships? But anyway, you had, the land was laid out to be settled in 6 mile by 6 mile grids, which gave you 36 1 by 1 mile squares. And one of those 36 squares, money from that land was supposed to go to education. See, we got a system of state colleges across America, and I assume other schools, you know, like elementary, and I don't know how the whole thing worked. But even 100 years ago, we were setting money aside for public education.
So you must be voting for Sanders, all excited?
No, I mean, if Sanders is the Democratic nominee, I'll vote for Sanders, but Sanders doesn't, to use the cliche, he doesn't blow my screw up.
One of the things I'm excited about is today is Sunday, and I believe the Democrat primary, is it
Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, so tomorrow, the projected to win the New Hampshire primary and
Iowa.
Iowa caucus, it's
Oh.
Sanders.
Oh, it's a New Hampshire primary and Iowa caucus?
It's the Iowa caucus for sure. Is it the?
No, I mean, I know the Iowa caucus comes first, then the New Hampshire primary, and then within a few weeks of that, the California primary. So it looks like Sanders is gonna win Iowa and New Hampshire, which will make him the front runner, and then everything will depend on California.
We have ours early this year,
Yeah.
March
and-
3rd.
Right, so my point is, it looks like, if I had to bet at this point, Sanders is gonna get the nomination. So this is the first time in American history that the socialists have finally taken over a major American party. And I am really gleeful about this. I'm sad that the Democrats have allowed the communists to take over their party. But I'm happy because I think Trump will crush him.
Well,
And
Trump wants
let me
Sanders.
respond, let me continue. The reason I think he's gonna crush Sanders is because the one thing the Democrats do very well is they lie to themselves. They lied to themselves that they could somehow remove Trump from office, and they're lying to themselves that the American people will embrace the most left-wing candidate in history. And what they're gonna do is they're gonna throw up the candidate of their heart, not the candidate of their head. And he is going to be crushed by Trump.
All right,
Because the American people are not as far left as the far left part of the Democrat Party.
So,
Real quick,
no,
I'm
hold on,
sorry.
because before I forget everything.
Okay, sure.
Um,
Michael, just hold on, Michael. He has the,
Okay, the Democrats never thought they could remove Trump via impeachment. I mean, there was a hope, but it wasn't a strong hope.
Then you haven't been on Facebook recently reading.
I don't go on Facebook.
Okay, because I can tell
I mean,
you,
if
the
you,
Democrats I read on Facebook all thought this was it.
well, then they're dopes.
Okay.
I'll go on Facebook if you post a new painting, but that's about it. Now, the person who wins Iowa generally doesn't, I don't think generally wins to become the nominee. You know, Iowa's a weird thing. And yeah, well, according to Nate Silver, who compiles all the surveys, Biden has a 50% chance of becoming, he's got the biggest chance right now of becoming the party nominee. And I don't know if Sanders is in second place to him, but just because Bernie wins New Hampshire and Iowa doesn't mean that he's guaranteed to win the nomination. And as I said last week, I'd be okay with Biden, because, you know, I think things worked pretty well under Obama. You know, I mean, there's been a bunch of ugly stuff under Trump, but the economy's been reasonably strong. The income inequality or the wealth inequality is the largest it's been in 100 years. But I don't think we need to do Bernie Sanders shit to fix that. I think it needs fixing, but I don't think we need to burn everything down.
I have a
Michael,
response.
sure,
Um,
sorry, Mike.
The lower classes, the blue collar jobs are getting the highest increase in the wage increases. In the past year, not only have the lower classes gotten more jobs than they've had in 60 years, but they're also getting the higher pay increases.
I've read that a lot of those pay increases are due to states increasing minimum wage. If your state raises minimum wage from the federal level, which hasn't changed in 25 years, of $7.25 an hour, and your state raises it, or city raises it to $12 or $14 an hour, then a lot of people are gonna see a huge increase in their income.
All right, well, that may be the reason. I don't know, I haven't gone into it in that much depth.
I don't know either.
But I also think if you didn't have a job at all, and now you do, that's a good reason to believe that the lower class is benefiting from this. And as we know, unemployment is the lowest it's been in 70 years. The other thing I wanted to mention, just before I forget, is that for a long time now, Rick has refused to believe, I think I got him to accept when I showed him the court, that a U.S. court had finally come down on the side of the Tea Party and awarded them damages from the IRS because the Obama administration had used the IRS to shut down the Tea Party's, they had a certain tax status. Now,
Well, they applied for tax exempt status.
so there's a name for it. Now, for a long time, I was furious at Obama using the IRS to harass his political opponents because it's against, everything this country stands for, and is a good window into the character of the man that Rick so admires. But I found this week, as a matter of fact, there was a report from a company that does nothing but analyze how political parties are able to increase or decrease their votes. And their conclusion was that in 2012, the Obama administration's targeting of the tax-exempt status of the Tea Party in Florida and Ohio is what shut them down in the crucial swing states of Florida and Ohio, and that's how Obama won. Those particular states falling for Ohio is what determined the election. They believe that it turns out that the critical thing that the Tea Party was able to do in the 2010 election, when they took over the House of Representatives, the 2010 election was a historic election because it was one of the few times that the Republicans managed to really swing the House of Representatives over to them, to the Republican Party. And it was entirely due to the Tea Party revolution. Well, Obama had 2 years to shut him down, and apparently they were able to shut him down in Florida and Ohio, and that's how Obama stole the election in 2012.
Maybe the Tea Party was responsible for some Republican gains. Another thing was Republican gerrymandering. One of the greatest political strategies in recent political history was called red map. Republican strategists realized that it's a lot cheaper to win elections for state government than for national government. And they realized if they could take over state government, they could gerrymander the states to deliver more Republican senators and congressmen.
Yeah, and
Not senators, congress people. Senators are statewide. One more thing, just back to uranium for a second. No, one more second. Let me, before I forget.
That's why you
that-
have any paper.
Okay, that article, yeah, we should probably do this all the time. That article you read from the New York Times said, due to a downturn in the uranium market, no uranium was being exported at the U.S. at that time.
Okay, I said that.
Yeah,
It's in the article.
Okay,
That's
all right,
okay.
all right.
But,
Now
but,
you,
but before that, 25% had gone to Europe and Japan. And by the way, that's just taking the word of the Uranium One
yeah, I know,
spokesman.
they can be full of
They
shit.
could be lying too, given that that spokesman was an employee of the Russian government.
Right, okay.
Real quick, Michael Root, are you surprised Sanders didn't drop out after the heart attack? Does it even make sense to stay in the race after such a thing? I figured that would end his candidacy.
I'm not, like, that leads to another point, but to answer that one point, like somebody earlier asked, are we ever gonna get non-old white men running the country? The deal is that you have people, medical technology is much, much better. People can have near heart attacks, and then go get bypasses and cardiac stents and go on cholesterol blockers and all this stuff. And there's no reason that somebody can't keep going after a heart attack, especially if they're a monomaniacal lunatic like fucking Bernie Sanders. But we have what is going to be if not a crisis, is going to be an increasingly weird thing, because by 2040, we'll have the medical technology to get most people, at least most people with good medical insurance, living past the age of 90. And a lot of people making it to, their late 90s in pretty good shape. The number of supercentenarians, that is people who are 110 years old and older, has like tripled or quadrupled in the past 10 years. And this means that we're going to see candidates, Bernie is he 80? I don't know. But we're going to see older and older candidates. We're going to see older and older Supreme Court justices. By 2050, shit's going to be weird because you're going to have people on the Supreme Court who are old now and on the Supreme Court now. Some of them are still going to be on the court in 30 years. And it's going to be a source of annoyance for people who aren't 96 years old, but there are people who are 96 years old still governing us.
Should we take a break?
I just wanted to say one last thing. According to the Daily Caller, both sides gerrymander. So that's not a great explanation as to why 2010 led to the Tea Party revolution and the Republicans taking over Congress.
But that's the
I
daily.
live, I live in California, so whether you like the Daily Caller or not, if you live in California, they have a lock on this state. There's no way around it. They've changed so many laws, I forget every little thing they've done, but you can't get elected if you're a Republican anymore in California.
That's,
Or Illinois.
I mean, that's largely true, I don't know about Illinois, but that's largely true for California, but that's largely true because Democrats have a huge, many more people vote Democratic here than for the Republicans.
Well, there are a variety of things that are done differently in California now. There's something called ballot harvesting, where, just so you guys understand, ballot harvesting is when the Democrats will go into a poor neighborhood and they will make friends with everyone in a large apartment building. And they will, or the whole neighborhood. They start a year in advance. And eventually, they go door to door, apartment to apartment, collecting ballots and explaining to these people, we like the Democrat Party. They're not allowed to say vote for the Democrats, but they then collect their ballot. They give them the ballot, and then they take it back after the person's filled it out. This is illegal in most states. It's a new Democrat innovation in California. So, now, unless you wanted to rebut me, I want to end, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I just want to tell people to see how much more successful the Republicans were at gerrymandering in 2010. Just go Google REDMAP, REDMAP.
Okay, and if you want a balanced view on it, you can look at Ben Shapiro on gerrymandering. Both sides are doing it. I don't think it's right, but I don't think it's only the Republicans. There's no evidence for that. Both sides do it around the country.
There's a shitload of evidence. And sure, Democrats will try to do that, but they were far behind in 2010. We got our asses kicked. We got our asses kicked. The Republicans figured out that you could win an election for state legislator for $10,000, for $5,000.
Okay, we'll talk to Illinois. Talk to anyone from the state of Illinois or California. And also, thank you for using the IRS against your political opponents to shut down
Well, there's as much
in
evidence.
2012.
There's as much evidence that was Obama's doing as there is for Hillary being behind uranium one.
Well, the evidence is this, that the head of the IRS usually doesn't meet the president or go to the White House very often. And it turns out that there was a staggering increase, that there were a series of regular meetings between the head of the IRS and Obama in the election year going up to 2012. And it just so happened that the IRS crushed Republican opposition in the key swing states of Florida and Ohio. So if you want to put your head in the sand, you can, Rick.
Okay.
All right, I want to end this at 1 o'clock, so we have 10 more minutes for any subject you want. Take over.
Let's take a break. I gotta take a break. The live folks can catch the end of the session on YouTube. So say bye to the.
This whole
All right.
thing is going up on YouTube the regular way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It's been fun. We'll try to keep doing this.
Yep.
That's to the live people, but we're going to keep talking.
Yep.